Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. First of all, I just wanted to announce I was just consulting with Bhante Metta Vihari, and we thought it might be nice to do one guided meditation every day. So for those who want to come, I will do the guided meditation at 7 o'clock. That's this time, starting tomorrow evening. And then the Q&A will then commence half an hour later, start at 7:30. So for those who want to come to the meditation, guided meditation at 7 o'clock in the evening, and then Q&A afterwards. Okay, so here we go. It is often said Sila, Samadhi, Panya are complementary to each other. Is it correct? If so, is it necessary the Noble Eightfold Path? Is a path graduating from Samadhi to Samadhi? Thank you. I was going to talk about some of these issues later on, about to what extent these things are complementary and to what extent you start with one thing and you gradually move to the other ones, like as it says here, you're graduating from one to the other. And essentially, yes, that is correct. It is a gradual training. You move from samadhi to samadhi. It is not kind of just 8 factors randomly put together. There's a very clear sequence there. And this is very explicit in the suttas. The Buddha actually says this in a number of places, that from one you get the next one, from the next one you get the one after, etc., all the way to full awakening, basically. But it's not purely a one-way relationship. You have to have samadhi to some extent before you can have sammasankappa. If you have a completely wrong view, there's no basis for having sammasankappa, right intention. So you need to have the prior one to be able to have the one that comes afterwards. So the stronger the one before is, the more powerful the one afterwards becomes. But there's also a feedback relationship. So when you come to the highest stages of the path, when you have like sammasati or you have sammasamadhi, that also feeds back to the beginning of the path, right? So that when you have samadhi, it actually strengthens your sila. When you have panya, it strengthens both your sila and your samadhi. So there's a one-way relationship whereby you have to have the one before for the next one to arise, but then there's also a feedback mechanism at the same time. It is often said that sila, samadhi and panya are complementary to each other. Well, I would say that complementary, they are part of this graduating process, right? Whereby you start with one and you gradually go through all the factors. So samadhi is always based on sila, panya is based on samadhi. And samadhi has sila within it. So when you get to samadhi, sila is already there. Without sila, you cannot have samadhi. Samadhi is a pure state of mind, right? There's no defilements there. Sila is perfect at the moment you have samadhi. And panya has both samadhi and sila within it. When you have panya, it is said in the suttas that when you become a stream enter, a sovan, then samadhi is stable. All the other path factors are stable. They are stable because you have seen, you know what is good, what is bad. You don't go the wrong way anymore. So you have the stability of the other factors. So panya stabilizes everything else. Okay? So I'm not sure if complementary is precisely the right word. They obviously work together though. Okay. So if I haven't answered anything clearly, please write another question tomorrow or whatever. And see what we can do. Devante, regarding the Satipatthana Sutta, okay, I recognize the handwriting, I know who this is from. Okay, doesn't the preamble of the Sutta say that this is the sole way, or the way that leads in one direction, which re-emphasizes the importance of the Sutta? Also the postscript, which says that arahantship or anagami can be attained in 7 days, certainly makes it stand out. What are your thoughts on this? Okay. The problem here, of course, first of all, is always a translation problem, right? The phrase which is translated as the sole way sometimes, or sometimes the one and only way, is actually ekayana, is the Pali phrase behind that. And the exact meaning of ekayana is very disputed, and it's very hard to know what it means. This word occurs in the Satipatthana Sutta, and it occurs in one other place in the Pali Nikayas. It occurs in the Mahasihanada Sutta, the Greater Discourse on the Lion's Roar, Majjhima Nikaya number 12. And in Majjhima Nikaya number 12, it is used in such a way as to show that when you go the ekayana, the destination is certain. In other words, it means something like perhaps the direct path, or the path which leads to one result, perhaps, something like that. But to say it is the one and only path I think is very misleading. So Satipatthana in itself is not really a full path. It's important to remember that Satipatthana is just one factor of the Eightfold Path. It's the Eightfold Path that leads to awakening, and not Satipatthana in its own right. So what are the possible translations of ekayana? It's, as I said, maybe the direct way. But one very interesting interpretation is one of my monastic friends who has come up with this very interesting interpretation of the meaning ekayana. And he did a lot of research into the meaning of ekayana, not only in the Pali, but also in the Upanishads. You know, the Upanishads are the Hindu scriptures that existed just prior to Buddhism. And of course, because the Buddha came soon after these Hindu scriptures arose in India, he used some of that terminology which exists in those scriptures. And some of the terminology he would then refute and say this does not correspond with reality. And other terms he would actually use. And this word ekayana, it occurs in a very famous part of the Upanishads. There's a very famous sage in the Upanishads called Yajnavalkya. And Yajnavalkya is one of these samadhi sages, it seems, from those Upanishads. And the way that he uses ekayana when he talks to his wife is called Maitreyi, I think. I'm not that familiar with these scriptures, but and the way he uses them there, it actually seems to mean something like the path that goes to one. Eka ayana. Ayana means going. Ayana. Eka means one. The path to one. And that is interesting, isn't it? The path to one. What does that mean? To one? What does one mean? And of course, if you know the Pali Suttas, you know that one often is the significance of samadhi, right? You have ekagata, one-pointedness. Eka agata. Ekagata, one-pointedness, and the idea of eka, or oneness, or you have ekata, which means unification or singleness, right? So these are fairly standard terms in the suttas for meaning samadhi. So he is arguing that ekayana means something like the path to convergence, is how he translates it. The path to unity, the path to samadhi, basically. I don't know, I think perhaps it's a little bit speculative the way he does that, but nevertheless it's interesting because it shows you that the number of interpretations are quite wide. And if it does mean that, it fits very well with how Satipatthana is used in the suttas. The way Satipatthana is used in the Buddha suttas, remember that you cannot just look at the Satipatthana sutta, you have to look much more widely to understand how a term is used in the suttas. And the way Satipatthana is used, it is found in the Noble Eightfold Path between right effort and right stillness or right samadhi. That's where it is. And remember that the Eightfold Path is graduated, right? So Satipatthana, the purpose of that, what it leads to Samma Samadhi. That's its purpose. That's why it's for her. So if ekayana should mean going to one, it would fit that context perfectly. And this is not just the Eightfold Path, it's throughout the suttas. You see that the relationship between Sammasati and Sammasamadhi is always that Sammasati is the cause and the condition for the arising of Sammasamadhi. That is its purpose. So, so that is the first part. And the second part of the question is, it says at the end of the sutta that arahantship or anagami can be attained in 7 days. That is true, it does that. Exactly what that means is a little bit uncertain. There is a Chinese parallel to the Satipatthana Sutta, and there it says that you can attain it not only in 7 days, but it takes it down to 1 day or half a day. So it's a bit unsure exactly what the Buddha may have said. It's a bit uncertain. But remember here also that the Satipatthana Sutta, if Satipatthana is practiced fully, it can also be regarded as even including the jhanas in a sense. So Satipatthana, for example, if you look at Satipatthana Sutta, you talk about the Chittanupassana, the contemplation of the mind. How is that explained? Chittanupassana is explained as contemplation of things like the Mahagata Chitta. Now, Mahagata Chitta and the what are some of the other ones now? It doesn't come to mind very well here. Mahagata Chitta, it doesn't. Anyway, these are like Mahagata Chitta is a term basically for samadhi. It is a term used in the Brahma Viharas. It's a term that is used often as a synonym for the jhana factors. The Anuttara Chitta is another one in there. Unsurpassed mind. And all of these things are synonyms for deep samadhi. So sometimes it can also be regarded as the jhanas are included in the Satipatthana when Satipatthana is practiced to an absolute maximum extent. So there are many different ways of looking at this, and I don't think it means that you can practice arahantship or you can practice to anagami without samadhi, because then you are really only practicing the 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, but you need all 8 for full awakening here. Okay, so I hope that is satisfactory here. So I'll move on to the next one here. Okay, I'll do another one first because this is the same person, so I can tell by the handwriting. Okay. In the Anguttara Twos, there is a sutta mentions that there are monks 2 powers, 2 bala, Pachavekana bala and Bhavana bala. Okay. There the Buddha explains these 2 terms which I found matching with the explanation you give today. Can you please go through that small sutta and explain a bit further what is your reflection on that? Do not answer today itself if it's not easy to locate the sutta. Okay, yeah. Okay, I can have a look at that because I do actually have the suttas with me, so I can always have a look. I can't remember myself the exact definition of those things. So I will have a look before I answer that question so I don't say anything silly. So okay, let's move on to the next one here. Okay, in the Soil Remover Sutta, the Buddha mentions the gross defilements, body, verbal, sila. How would you explain the mental misconduct there? Okay, that's a good question, and perhaps I didn't explain that very clearly. It is not very clearly defined in that sutta, so it's difficult to know exactly what is meant. And there are different ways of looking at that. One way, which I did mention while I was going through the sutta, is that these things, when you talk about the 3 silas together like that, bodily, verbal and mental, they often refer to the 10 ways of unwholesome action. So there's the 3 forms of bodily misconduct, stealing, killing and sexual misconduct, the 4 forms of verbal misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. And then the 3 types of mental misconduct there are ill will and covetousness, it's called. Basically, desire is defined as desiring the property of others. Basically, it's a strong form of desire. And the last one is wrong view. So these are the mental misconducts there. And I think the main probably misconducts that might be meant in this particular case are mental defilements that are so strong that they often lead to actually breaking the precepts. If the mental defilements are so strong that they lead to that, or lead you to say things that are bad, or do things that are bad, that I think is a sort of conduct that actually is meant to by mental defilements. It's a strong form of a mental defilement. Okay. Often people seem to think I express my opinion harshly. I don't mean to do so at all. Does this mean I lack in kindness? Not really, no, not necessarily. It means maybe that this is just your personality. Your personality is maybe to speak things, in a kind of robust way, or however you want to call it. It doesn't necessarily mean you are harsh, but be careful. It's always good to develop more metta and compassion. And when you develop more metta and compassion, your speech tends to be more soft, right? Just by nature. So if you tend to speak maybe in a way which can seem harsh to others, then if you can kind of speak more softly, then gradually over time, that may actually disappear for you. So even though you may not actually be in a very defiled mental state, you can always make the mental state more pure. And the purer it is, the more beautiful the speech will tend to be. And this is one of the great benefits of developing the mind, is that when you develop the mind, sometimes when you try to be virtuous, you try to restrain yourself, you try not to do the wrong things, and particularly try not to say the wrong things, which often can be very hard. You really need a lot of mindfulness not to say the wrong thing. It comes out so quickly, right? Suddenly it's said, oops, too late. It's so hard to do these things sometimes. So what we really all need to do is to purify the mind, because once the mind is pure, then the wrong speech won't come out regardless. So it's a very, that's why it is so powerful to purify the mind. So this is the ideal thing. And then you find that you tend to speak less the purer your mind is. You tend to speak more softly, and everything becomes better. So, yeah. So I don't think it necessarily means you lack kindness, but of course it can create difficulties for you if other people perceive you as harsh. So if other people do perceive you as harsh, then maybe it is wise just to create more harmony and to have better social relations. Maybe see if there's a way you can speak so you're not perceived as being so harsh. You're perceived as more soft. Maybe if you can do that, it might actually be beneficial for yourself as well. Okay, Bhante, if one wants to read, study and understand the suttas, where should one begin? From which sutta and how should one progress? Yes. I usually recommend people, if they want to read the suttas, to read like an anthology of the suttas. Anthology is like a lot of suttas, put together in a certain system. Extracts from here, extracts from there. And there is particularly one anthology which is available right now, which is very good. And I don't know, I assume most people here prefer to read in English. I guess, I don't know if that's the case, but if that is the case, that you prefer to read in English, then a very good anthology is the one that has been done by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, which is called In the Buddha's Words. Right? Yeah, I think so, In the Buddha's Words. And that is a very nice anthology. He has taken out some of the most important suttas from around the Pali Canon, translated them very nicely. In my opinion, he is one of maybe the best translator into English who's available today, in my personal opinion anyway. And he has given it nice introductions where he explains what's going on. He has grouped the suttas together nicely. And then he also has notes at the end to explain what is going on. So In the Buddha's Words by Bhikkhu Bodhi is what I would recommend people to start off with. Then you get a nice overview of the suttas. Read that 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Once is never enough. Read it a few times. And then when you feel you have a good grasp of what's going on, then you can start reading almost anything else after that. Just take the Majjhima Nikaya, take the Anguttara Nikaya, recently published also by Bhikkhu Bodhi translation. Take any one of those and start reading, and then you will be able to understand what's going on, basically. It's also nice sometimes to listen to a sutta explanation by someone you trust. So if there's somebody you trust who gives good explanations of the suttas, it can be very advantageous to actually listen to what they have to say here, because then they can sort of get you started, get you going here. And then later on, when you start to understand the sutta yourself, then you can start arguing with that authority afterwards. That's what I used to do. I started learning my suttas at Bodhinyana Monastery. Ajahn Brahmali was my teacher. In the beginning, I was just learning it, and after a while, I started arguing with Ajahn Brahmali instead. But that's good. It's a good sign. We need to, we can't just take things in without questioning or arguing. It's important to argue a little bit. So that is it's perfectly okay. So yeah, and Ajahn Brahmali hasn't thrown me out of the monastery yet, so it can't be that bad. Okay. There's also, suttas are also available online, so if you just want to read individual suttas, you can go, there's a well-known website called Access to Insight, which has almost all the suttas available in English translation. You can go there. I personally prefer the translations by Vicky Bodhi. I think they are better, more solidly researched, but that is obviously a much cheaper option if you are on the internet anyway. It's a cheaper way of doing it. Okay, regarding the gradual training, sometimes we see people get attracted to meditation straight away, especially in the West, and may go very deep in quick time. Does this mean that they have already done the basics in their previous existences? Yes, I think that's basically what it means. That's exactly right. Either they have done it in previous existences, or perhaps they have even done the right thing in this life. Probably they have been living a good life in this life as well. So this happens. But often what happens in the many places as well is that people start meditating without the proper basis, and very often they don't get the results. It's only a very small minority that actually get good results in meditation. It's very tiny minority here. And the reason why they don't get results is precisely because they haven't really understood that there's more to the Buddhist path than meditation practice. Meditation is great. It can do many things for you. It can make you feel more peaceful, more balanced, more relaxed, even if you don't practice sila. But if you really want to use meditation to gain the benefits the Buddha talked about, you have to practice it as part of a package. That package is the Eightfold Path. What is truly meant by noble silence, and why is it important in a meditation retreat? Okay, noble silence means different things depending on the context. But noble silence, in the most basic meaning, is just being quiet, right? Don't saying anything here. Why is it noble? And one of the things that I usually recommend people on a meditation retreat, sometimes it's actually quite hard to be quiet, right? We're used to talking in daily life, we're used to communicating with people, and suddenly being quiet actually can be quite hard. In the beginning you feel a bit cut off, you feel a bit, you're not sure if you can, you feel a bit strange about being silent. So what I recommend people to do, so they don't actually feel oppressed in a sense by noble silence, is to remember that on a retreat like this, there are people who are enjoying the meditation, there are people who maybe have some happiness and bliss, some success in the meditation practice, and just think about it as a gift that you are giving to the people around you. I'm giving you the gift of silence. I'm giving you the gift of not talking on these 6 days. It's a very short time anyway. And then when you give it as a gift, then you're actually making it into a positive force. You're actually making merit while you're being silent, because you have a positive intention in your mind. And then instead of it being oppressive, it becomes something beautiful instead. So this is important in Buddhism, always try to use these things that we're doing in a positive way, not in a negative way. The same with the precepts. Don't make it into something which oppresses you and you feel negative about. Make it something beautiful, a gift that you give to the world. I'm going to keep the precepts out of kindness for the world around me. And then it becomes so beautiful. And then you feel so good inside because you're doing it. So it's all about how we do things is more important than what we do often. And it is important in meditation. Well, it is important because it calms the mind down, right? If you talk a lot, the mind chatters. Chatting always starts in the mind. So if you don't talk, then after a while it starts to calm down in the mind as well. And that is when meditation becomes possible. And that is also where you find the higher meaning of noble silence. The higher meaning of noble silence is samadhi, the jhanas. The Buddha goes so far as to say that the real noble silence is the second jhana, because there is no movement anymore. The mind stops, and the very foundation for speech has been eliminated completely. It's not possible anymore. So that is the deeper meaning of noble silence. And after a while, I know people say that, they practice noble silence for a while, and after a while it becomes so beautiful to be silent. You don't want to talk again. You just feel, wow, how wonderful it is to be silent. I remember some years ago, Ajahn Brahmali went on a long retreat, 6 months retreat, and he hadn't spoken to anybody for 6 months, and he hadn't even seen anybody for 6 months pretty much. And then when he came out, he wasn't able to speak anymore, because his mind was so still, he couldn't speak. And he would kind of whispered a few words. It was very funny. And he said that just trying to speak gave him a headache, because he had been so quiet for so long that it just didn't work anymore. His mind had sort of stopped completely almost. So anyway, so that's where we would like to head, ideally. Okay, in the Soil Remover Sutta, the thoughts accord with the Dhamma is Dhamma Vitaka, isn't it? That's exactly right, yes. If we say first jhana also includes the thoughts according to the Dhamma, then it will contradict with the Atta Kanagara Sutta, MN2, Atta you mean MN 52, right? Anyway, where first jhana is one of the doors for awakening, full enlightenment. Perhaps not. I'm not sure if it does contradict, because what the sutta here is saying, all it is really saying is that the mind hasn't become fully still before you reach the second jhana. It doesn't say that the first jhana cannot be used. It just says that the second jhana, it is fully still. But it is a point though, and it may very well be that the Dhamma Vitaka does not include the first jhana. I think probably it doesn't, because this Vitaka is so subtle and so refined. I think it's probably stretching it a bit to call it Dhamma, Vitaka that accord with the Dhamma. So I think my preferred interpretation is that it does not include the first jhana, and Dhamma Vitaka is just the wholesome thoughts that you have prior to that. And that also fits with Majjhima Nikaya 19, where the Buddha divides the thinking into two parts, the good part and the bad part. And the good part, after that, he goes into the first jhana, not the second jhana. Actually, that is not quite true either, because there is some interesting variations on that one. Anyway, whoever wrote this one, if you want to approach me privately, I'll talk to you more about it, because it might be a bit too many details here for those people who might not be interested here. So I think it can be argued probably both ways. That's my verdict right now, which might change in the future. Okay, so Bhante, can you please say something about virya, usually translated as energy, and vayama, usually translated as effort? Are they the same or different? What is the middle path in terms of striving? How can we tell when our striving is too much or too little? Okay, very good. I'm not going to say the name. The name is on the bottom here, but I'll leave it anonymous, because then it's. I think that's probably better here. Yes, I think there is a difference between virya and vayama, and I think the difference is that virya is the kind of natural energy that arises in the mind when the mind is well developed. It's not an effort that you put forth, it's an energy that results from the practice. So for example, when your meditation is going very well, the mind is becoming bright, you experience joy, and very often together with that is virya, is energy in the mind. It's not something you are putting forth, it's happening because the meditation is deepening. So that's why I think the translation energy is quite good, because it's not something you are doing, it's a natural state of the mind. Whereas vayama is more to do with putting forth the right effort when the right effort is required. So for example, if you have an unwholesome state of mind and you want to change that, at that time you don't have any virya, because unwholesome state of mind is opposed to virya, right? So you don't have virya, but you still have the effort that you can put in to try to overcome that unwholesome state. And the way to do that is again, the right way of doing that, in my opinion, the best way of doing that is by using wisdom. So you have a defilement arising in the mind, instead of pushing it away, forcing it out, you bring up the memory, all your understanding of the Dhamma, your understanding of that these things are suffering, that they lead in the wrong way, and through that understanding that you have built up in the past, you eliminate that defilement. And that, I think, in my opinion, is the right way of using striving on the path, using it just to bring up the right memory at the right time. Too much and too little, well, of course there is that famous sutta, which I'm sure you know about the Sona who was walking on his meditation path. I don't know if everybody here knows this story. It's a nice story from the Anguttara Nikaya. And Sona was one of these people. He had been raised in a nice household in a very soft way, and he was very tender, and his skin was very tender, and he was walking on his walking path back and forth, and then he started to bleed from the sole of his feet because it was putting forth so much energy. And then the Buddha came to him and said that, you are putting forth too much energy here. It's like he's saying that it's like a violin. When the strings are too tight, it doesn't produce a nice sound. And also if the strings are too slack, it also doesn't produce a nice sound. It has to be just right balance. Then the violin, I think not a violin in those days, it was more like a lute or something like that, one of the ancient Indian instruments. When it's just right, then it is the right tension in the string. Then you have the right energy. And once you have the right energy, that's when you can make the breakthrough to the Dhamma. And to know exactly what that is not always very easy, but one of my favorite admonitions by the Buddha, one of my favorite teachings by him, which I always like to talk about, which I have mentioned already before, is where the Buddha says that this is particularly regarding where one should live. Somebody was, this maybe not somebody asking, but the question was, where is the right place for a monk to live? And the answer is, if you are in a place where the wholesome qualities are growing, in other words, you're becoming more peaceful, you're becoming more mindful, your samadhi, your stillness is improving, you're becoming more kind, you're becoming more good-hearted, whatever it is, if the good qualities are increasing, and the bad ones, the irritation, the desire, the restlessness, whatever, if they are declining, then you should stay where you are. And this is basically, this type of argument is applicable to almost anything in life. Whenever you are going to make a decision about anything, should I use more energy or less energy, applies as well. Are you already doing well? Are you already improving? If you are already improving, then the energy you're using is probably right. If you're not improving, if you're not getting better in getting more wholesome states and less unwholesome states, then perhaps there's something wrong with the energy. That's one possibility. Or there's something wrong with where you live, or there's something wrong with whatever, whatever it might be. But I have always found that particular advice extremely useful. Sometimes I've been living at Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth in Australia for a number of years now, over 18 years. And sometimes, when you live in one place for a long time, you think, oh, should I go somewhere else? Maybe it would be good for me to, do something different. But I always come back to this one advice. Am I improving in good states and declining in bad ones? Yes, so I should stay here. If I get a bit irritated with something, right when you get irritated, you think, oh, I must go. This is how the mind works, I must go somewhere else. Then I think, is this the right reason for leaving, just because I'm upset about something? And of course the answer is no, that's not the right reason. The right reason is if you're not improving anymore in good states. That is the right reason. So you stay on. And a very powerful advice, you can use it also in lay life. You can use, sometimes people think, oh, should I get a new job perhaps, or should I, where should I live, and all these things. Well, if you are really serious about the Buddhist path, if you're serious about Buddhist practice, then, well, Is it going to help you to get a new job? Is it not going to help you? Is it going to be detrimental for you? Is it going to drag you down, make you too stressed perhaps, more upset and angry here? If you live in a new place, what is a good neighborhood? You know, all these kind of factors. Any decision in life can basically be based on that one principle. Incredibly useful principle, I have found anyway in my life. Okay, so next one. Okay, much merit to you for coming to Sri Lanka to help us in the path. Okay. If someone attains jhana, does that person attain enlightenment then and there? Or does it give the data, the experience to attain enlightenment maybe later on? May all attain nibbana. That's a very nice sentiment there. Soon I should say as well. May all attain nibbana soon. Okay, that's a very nice note. Okay, so does that mean you attain enlightenment right then and there? No, it doesn't mean that. I think the reason why it doesn't mean that is simply because sometimes it takes quite a while for the mind to, as you say, gather all the information, looking at things from different angles and getting the full perspective on things. Remember, the point here is that when you attain the jhana, you have, as a consequence of that, you have what they call yatha bhuta jnanadassana. Yatha bhuta jnanadassana means seeing things as they actually are. In other words, you don't have a distortion in the mind anymore. The mind is clear, you see things in the right way here. But just because you see things in the right way, it doesn't mean that the awakening happens straight away, because sometimes you have to keep seeing things in the right way. You have to see this thing in the right way, that thing in the right way. It's also about where you place your attention, right? What are you looking at? Are you looking in the right place? And as you keep on gathering this data, looking again and again, getting into jhana or samadhi or whatever, again and again, getting yatha bhuta jnanadassana, expanding your understanding of all the five khandhas in their various manifestations, past, future, present, in all the manifestations that are possible. As you gather all that data, and the more you think about it, eventually that breakthrough happens. But it doesn't happen straight away. It's like you have to understand the khandhas fully, and only when you understand the khandhas fully is it possible to make the breakthrough. That's why it takes a bit of time. Okay, so okay, Venerable Sir, you mentioned there are no female Brahmas, but there are female Devas. Can you explain why? Okay, I didn't mean that no female, they are neither male nor female Brahmas. They are genderless, they are sexless, right? They are just Brahmas, that's all. The reason is because Devas are still in the sphere of sensuality, right? Sensual experience. And of course, in the sphere of sensuality, that's where you have differentiation between the genders. And once you go beyond sensuality, well, there isn't any basis anymore for gender differences. It just disappears. It becomes completely meaningless. And that's why it also disappears. Oops. Okay, when discussing the suitable basis, which differs from person to person, you said that is why there are four rather than fewer jhanas. Okay. Did you mean to imply that not everyone can or should attain all the jhanas? Are different jhanas more appropriate for different people? Or must they always be attained all four or 8 in succession? I think that it is perhaps the case that not everybody may need all 4 jhanas. It's possible. But it's not really, sometimes you get questions, people say, oh, do you need jhana or not to become a stream enter? But really, it is the question I feel is misplaced. It's really a misunderstanding of the Dhamma to even ask that question. Because usually the reason why people ask that question is because, jhana is too difficult, I don't want to do it, so if I can find another way, I will find another way. But that's not really the point. The point is there is a path. It's called the Eightfold Path. You practice that path. And the consequence of practicing that path, if you do it in the right way, is that you become a stream enter, you become a non-return, you become an arahant eventually. So you just practice it. You don't ask yourself whether jhana is necessary or not. If stream entry happens before jhana, great, wonderful. So certainly that's great. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean you stop. You keep practicing, and then eventually you attain the jhanas or whatever else. So it's not about, do I need jhana or not? It's just there is an Eightfold Path, and that's what you need to practice. So I think that particular question is not a very useful one. Yes, so again, it's the same thing with this question perhaps, that you don't really need to ask yourself, what kind of jhana do I need? You just practice the Eightfold Path. And as you practice the Eightfold Path, you get the first jhana. If nothing happens, you move on to the second jhana. If still nothing happens, you move on. You just keep practicing, right? And eventually, as you practice that path, you will attain awakening. But you don't stop because you think, oh, I'm the sort of person who only needs 2 jhanas, so I will stop here. That's not the right way of thinking, right? You just keep practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. But it is interesting that all 4 jhanas are mentioned in the Noble Eightfold Path. It seems to imply that at least for most people probably, all 4 jhanas are probably required for full awakening to be possible. Are different jhanas more appropriate for different people? I perhaps don't know. Or must they always be attained all 4 or all 8 even in succession? I think if you can go even beyond the 4 jhanas, that might be helpful to also to use the immaterial realms. But it is interesting that the Eightfold Path includes only 4 jhanas, and it doesn't actually include the immaterial attainments. So they are, at the very least, they are optional. Oops, blank one here. Emptiness question here. Maybe. Okay. Okay, I have experienced a mental position where for a very short time I can be without any thought, empty or blank, but all my senses are awake. Is this something that I should cultivate or develop or get away from? Now that's great. That's very, very good. If you can have a mind without thinking, but it's also a mind that is clear and bright, right? Sometimes you don't think very much, but you're just very tired. Of course, that's not really what we want. But the thinking mind, which is clear, not thinking and clear, right? That's a very beautiful kind of mind. It feels very good, it feels very peaceful, it feels right. And yes, your senses are still there, but at least you're not thinking very much. That's good. You are certainly going in the right direction. Definitely you should cultivate that. That is exactly what you should be cultivating. That is like a state of mindfulness when that happens. And from there, it is often possible to focus on things like the breath, because your mind is already quite clear if you have no thinking going on. At that point, you can probably focus on the breath or do any other kind of meditation technique. So well done. That is, you're definitely heading in the right direction here. Okay, after the breath is lost and the body vanishes, what should one do until the nimitta appears? There is no object of focus. Okay, so usually at this stage, very often there are many things you can do, but very often you just have to wait, right? You just have to enjoy the peace. So if you find that everything disappears, just sit there and enjoy the peace of that. And if you can see, sometimes all you need is a bit more energy in the meditation practice, a bit more piti sukha perhaps, a bit more happiness in there. And that happiness is often conjoined with the nimitta arising. The nimitta is a very happy state. So if you just allow it to be here and just enjoy the peace, enjoy what is there, and just that sense of enjoyment may be enough for something to happen for you. So just wait, be patient. Don't be afraid because everything disappears. Sometimes people get afraid at this stage, and fear, of course, then tends to pull you out again. So there's nothing to be afraid of. It just means that you are feeling peace. You're feeling something beautiful. Otherwise, what you can also do sometimes is that you can go back on the breath, for example, and you can maybe think about something. You can use your, again, this idea of Chaganusati or Silanusati, just to very, very gently just bring up some beautiful memories from the past, something nice you have done, something that generates that piti that you need for meditation to become deep. It's absolutely essential to have piti, to have joy in the heart for meditation to become deep. If you haven't got that, it's not going to work. You can see that in the suttas everywhere. It's a very standard progress of meditation. Pamodja, the gladness, piti, passaddhi, sukha, samadhi, yata buddha nanadasana, nibbida, viraga, etc. So it is absolutely essential. You cannot get samadhi without piti, without joy here. And that is why there is so much emphasis in the sutta of giving rise to that piti through the right type of recollection. So if you find that you are peaceful, but there isn't enough joy there, you can try some of these things and give rise to more piti here. Okay, the Buddha used 4 similes to illustrate the 4 jhanas. Right, the bathroom attendant, yeah, the one with the ball, exactly, yeah, lotus submerged in cool water rising up in a lake, and the body covered in white cloth. Each of these similes is based on the body. However, Ajahn Brahm's teaching on jhana is about letting go of the body. How should we understand these similes if we let go of the body here? Okay. Yes, the word kaya does occur in these things, and the understanding basically is that the word kaya in Pali is not the same as the physical body in English. The basic meaning of the word kaya is like group or aggregate or conglomeration of something. It means a mass of something. And you will find that in the suttas, the word kaya is used in also many idiomatic senses, in other words, not in a literal sense. And to give you some examples of how it is used. For example, it is said that you attain the 8 vimokas. Now the 8 vimokas are the jhanas, immaterial realms, and also the final cessation of things. And you attain these, it says there, kayena. Kayena means literally with the body. But how can you attain cessation? How can you attain the immaterial realms or attainments with the body? It's impossible, right? Because these are absolutely free of body, that's absolutely sure. So what does it mean then? And what it actually means in those contexts, it means that you have a direct experience of these things. With the body means directly, personally, immediately. And that can be seen in the suttas elsewhere, whereby it distinguishes between an understanding of the Dhamma, which is the understanding you get when you become a stream entry. You understand the Dhamma, you know what Nibbana is, you know the Four Noble Truths, but you haven't yet directly experienced Nibbana. Direct experience of Nibbana happens when you become an Arahant. Direct experience of Nibbana in this sense means the ending of the defilements. That's how Nibbana is defined in the suttas. When the defilements end, that is when you attain Nibbana. And that direct experience only happens at Arahantship, but the understanding happens already at stream entry. So kayena happens when you become an Arahant. And there are suttas which explain this particular point. So kayena, with the body, means here something else, right? It means directly in this particular way here. So for that reason, it's important to remember, to understand the idiom of kaya, how it is actually used in the suttas. When you understand that, then you can understand how this works. So kaya then means directly, with the body, with the mind, personally, with your entire personality. And then there is no distinction really between body and mind in that particular case. Okay, could you please talk of your understanding of the nature of jhana? I'm somewhat confused as to what constitutes the 4 jhanas that the Buddha frequently talks about and encourages disciples to cultivate. Some of the main reasons for my confusion are that Ajahn teaches jhana where one still maintains awareness of the physical form. Ajahn Brahmali teaches jhana whereby all experience of the five senses fades away. Then there is debate concerning the similes for the jhanas. That's exactly what we're talking about now, yeah, and the use of the word kaya. Plus different interpretations of the phrase secluded from sensual pleasure, secluded from unwholesome states. Okay, so again, so this is about jhanas, and I was actually going to talk about jhanas much later on the retreat, but now everything is now coming up now, so I guess we might as well talk a little bit about these things now. And yes, there is a lot of different interpretations about what jhana actually means. And this makes it very difficult sometimes. People get very confused, and it's very hard to get kind of reliable advice for what these things actually are. So this is how I go about looking at these things. The first thing to remember, there are many things to remember about the jhana, but one of the things to remember about them is the way that they are described in the suttas as always as something very, very profound. The jhanas are always grouped together with the four stages of awakening in the suttas. In other words, they form a special category, the four stages of awakening and the four jhanas, always together. And they are called uttari manusadhamma, superhuman states, things that are beyond ordinary human beings. They are called the alang arya nanadasana visesa, the distinctions in knowledge and vision worthy of the Aryas, Aryan people, right? They are called the sambodha sukha, the happiness of enlightenment. The jhanas are called the happiness of enlightenment. It's quite interesting, isn't it? It means that you are very close to enlightenment when you attain the jhanas. You're almost there. This is the kind of happiness you can expect enlightenment to be similar to this. They are called, and this is one of the things that comes up in the sutta I'm going to do very soon, they are called the Tathagata pada. Tathagata pada means footsteps of the Tathagata. So in other words, when you get to the jhanas, you know that you are in the vicinity of the Buddha. That's how profound they are. You have some sense, well, the Buddha must have been here, because this is so profound that it can only be, Buddhas must be close to this. And there's many, many more usages of the jhanas like that, which shows that these things are extraordinarily profound states. They are not ordinary states at all. So then, when I read those things, and I then think about jhana, it occurs to me that, well, if one person explains jhana as something fairly ordinary, and somebody else explains jhana as something very profound, then I go with the person who explains them in the profound way. Because that is basically how the Buddha explained them. And when teachers say that you can still feel the body in jhana, that the senses are still operating, that you can still think in jhana, you can still contemplate in jhana, well, that to me does not have the same depth as somebody who says that you go into a state which is completely separated from these things. To me, that is much, much more profound and much more likely to actually mean a jhana state. So this is one way of reflecting that I use to decide where I place my confidence in these kind of matters. And this is the sort of way I've been thinking for a long time. And then you have the different interpretation of the phrase secluded from sensual pleasures. Yeah, that is a very interesting point, and it is a point that I myself have some opinions about that particular one, so I can give you my opinions if you're interested. So my opinions about that phrase, this is vivicheva kamehi is the Pali phrase for that one. And vivicha means like secluded from, so that is quite clear what that means. It means that you are apart. So what exactly are you apart from? What you are apart from is kamehi. So what is kamehi? And this word kama in Pali has two different meanings. Depending on the context, you have to actually understand the meaning differently. One meaning of kama is sensuality, is the defilement of the mind, right? The sense of desire in the mind for the 5 types of sensual pleasure. And that is one meaning of the word kama. But there is another meaning of the word kama, and that is when it means the same as kama guna. Kama guna is the 5 types of sensual pleasure that you have through the 5 senses: the eye, the body, the ear, the nose, and the tongue, the 5 kama gunas. And kama is specifically said to also be equivalent to kama guna. So it also means the 5 senses. So in the formula for the jhanas, What does it mean there? And the answer, I think, is it quite clearly must mean the 5 senses. Why? Because it's used in the plural. Now, if you look in the Pali Dictionary, a good Pali Dictionary, there are some good ones around, there's one called the Critical Pali Dictionary, it tells you that karma in the plural always means the 5 senses, karma in the singular means the defilement. And if you compare that, and this is getting quite technical, I apologize if you feel it's too technical, but defilement of karma, the defilement of desire, exists in many different words in Pali. Lobha, tanha, kama, raga, sometimes chanda. All these words that mean desire, and they always, almost always without fault, occur in the singular. Tanha is a little bit different because you have 3 types of tanha, but generally they always occur in singular. So the defilement is always in the singular, and that's why karma in the singular means the defilement, whereas the karma in the plural tends to mean the 5 senses. So that is the argument I would use to actually say that this is what is meant here. In any case, the karma as essential defilement is already included in aloof from unwholesome states, right? That's what unwholesome states is. It's anger, it's sensuality, the 5 hindrances basically. It's already included there. And then you have the commentary to this sutta, the commentary to this phrase. And the commentary, also, I don't usually look at the commentaries that much, but the commentary says that by karma here, 2 types of karma are mentioned. What is called the kilesa karma. Kilesa karma is the defilement, and the other one is called the vattu karma. Vattu karma is like the basis of karma, which are the 5 senses in this case, or the objects of the 5 senses, if you like, the vattu karma. So I think that everything for me there points to the fact that karma here means the 5 senses. The 5 senses have disappeared at this particular point. Okay, and last one, it says here, I didn't read this out before. P.S. I find the simple advice to develop the jhana factors and focus on abandoning the 5 hindrances very useful. Yes, that is true. It is certainly very important to abandon the 5 hindrances, to develop the jhana factors. Yes, the jhana factors, they come about simply by the process of meditation. The jhana factors start to arise, right? But the point is that it only really is a jhana factor fully at the moment you enter a jhana. Prior to that, it is just ordinary piti, ordinary sukha. It's the moment you enter a jhana that it becomes a jhana factor proper. Okay, I hope you're happy with that one. That was a long technical discussion. And yeah. Okay, the last question for tonight. The timing is very good. So how does one practice Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana and Dhammanupassana meditation? Okay, how does one do that? There is a very simple answer to that one, and there is also probably a very long answer, and I will give you the simple answer. I'm not even sure if I know the long answer myself, so I'll just have to give you the simple one. And the simple answer is that the way that Satipatthana practice is specifically exemplified in the suttas is by Anapanasati. If you go, and this is something I'm going to talk about later on, if you go to the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta on mindfulness of breathing, right? It specifically says in that sutta that if you practice the full course of Anapanasati, do all the 16 elements to that particular course, if you practice it fully, you fulfill Satipatthana. So that's really all you have to do. And it's very interesting because things like Vedananupassana and Chittanupassana are not really explained as such in the Satipatthana Sutta. It's just mentioned there are these Vedanas. It mentions there are these Chittas, these states of mind. That's really all it says. It doesn't say what you're supposed to do. But then in the Anapanasati Sutta, that's where it actually says, and that's the only sutta that specifically says, this is how you practice these things. So that is what I would then say, well, if this is the instruction of the Buddha, that this is how you practice these things, then this is what we should be doing here. We should be practicing Chittanupassana, Vedananupassana, through mindfulness of breathing. This, to me, is the most obvious explanation for how to practice these things. Are there other ways? Perhaps there are. But sometimes, why invent the wheel again? Why redo things when the Buddha has made it quite clear how these things should be practiced?